Welcome to Therapy Sessions Cutting Toxic Family Ties. My name is Dr. Sherry Campbell, and I'm your host. I am a leading expert in the niche of toxic family abuse, and although my show cannot substitute for therapy, it is a survivor-based show. In me, you're not only going to get an expert, but you're also going to get a survivor, as I have also survived toxic family abuse. I know how hard it is. The goal I have is to give voice to the voiceless, to provide skills to help you to protect your peace, to stand your solid ground, and to navigate and heal the heartbreaks caused by toxic family. Please have a pen and paper available to give voice to your thoughts as you listen to each show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your bravery. So let the healing begin. Welcome back, everyone. As promised, I have the amazing Tanya Dube back on my show. I was just so in love with my first conversation with you, Tanya. I just had to have you on again. I think that there are so many people that think they can't survive their toxic family dynamics. And stories like yours that are truly sort of worst case scenario stories show all of us that we can. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what you think about survival. I read the whole series of Dave Pelzer. I don't know if you know who he is, but he wrote The Child Called It. He's the third worst case of abuse reported in California history. He might be fourth now because of the Turpin 13. But this was back in 1971 where what was in the home stayed in the home. They didn't take domestic violence out of the home. And he wrote a series of books. And I think what I learned from those is I do think there's a genetic component to survival because there's people like you and myself that can survive really horrific tragedies, you especially. And there's other people who feel like they can hardly survive things to us that would seem very menial or very simple. So what is your perspective on that? And like, what things have you used throughout your life that have helped you get through those really hard times?
Well, thank you for having me here. First of all, I love being here with you all the time. I love our time together. And thank you for that. I guess my thinking about it, because this has been a question of mine my whole entire life. It's sort of been driving my life for a good 35 years of my life was, why do people do the things they do? And what is the breaking point really for some people, because for others, it can really be stretched. And then somebody will go through something for the first time ever in their 40s. And that's it. It's just like game over. So I've always thought about that. And I think it's a really interesting thing because as I am the observer to my own life and the observer to my own actions and my behaviors and my thinking, what's happening around me in my outer environment, like all of that. It's an interesting thing because when my mother went through foster care, she went through a horrific experience with many foster homes. It really did a number on her psyche, as it would, but she was not ever able to get out of that fear body. So every choice she ever made was based on these fear-based decisions that just made her life worse and worse and worse. And she called in worse and worse people. And then, of course, I experienced a part of that being her child. And then I think part of the reason that she viewed me as competition for her in her life, I think one of the reasons for that was because being in foster care and growing up in foster care, which is how, she put me like right from birth into the foster care system, it never affected me the same way. I don't know, so to the second part of your question, the things that I've used in my life, I've always been like as a child, when we go through really horrific and weird things, like the adults in the room are not being the adults in the room, we tend to go inward. At least I did. I went inward. And so for that, for me, that meant reading books. And I became an actor when I was like 5. I thought it was really fun to start exploring and being other people. It was the only way I could really express myself. But going inward with books. And so I became a very inward person. I was very shy. If you called my name in front of a crowd of people, I became beet red. All of that stuff. But what it taught me was to be reflective. And so when I was like observing, everybody else in their behavior, I was able to contrast and compare. My foster home ended up being the safe place. these people fought to keep me in one foster home for 8 years of my life, where I had to go sit in front of a judge for 8 years and say, this is what I choose. This is why these people love me. I love them. It's stable. Like, I knew the right things to say, I guess, it worked. But I don't know. It's interesting. My foster father, I always call him my papa, because he was a grandfather age when they took me in. I was 2 when I went to live with them, but he used to always tell me, like, you're such a lion of a kid. You put up with so much stuff and you see so much stuff going on around you, and you just don't make it personal. And then I don't know that I was that way, but he instilled that in me, that I was that way,
Well, and what is superpower? Because, one of my favorite books is The Four Agreements. And one of the agreements is not to take anything personal, right?
Yes.
That is so hard when, where you had sort of like a Santa Claus in your life. I was stuck in the zone where I would never have someone coaching or teaching me something new. Mm-hmm. So I was taking it all as very personal. Well, and I also appreciate how you said that you went inward. I do think it's the only place children can go in scenarios that are abusive, where the adults are not adulting. And I also turned to books, and I called them my paper parents.
Can learn a lot from books.
That's right. In my very first book, I talked about, like, books carried me through. If I wanted sound of, perspective or advice, I could never turn to the emotionally out of control parents that I had. Uh-huh. And then another thing that really sort of caught me in what you said was, I didn't realize your mom had grown up in foster care. So she completely replicated the horrible life that she had in foster care. She literally birthed you into it. And thank God, genuinely, that whatever's looking out for you in this lifetime puts you in the right places, and you didn't have that same experience, right?
Yeah, well, she fed me to the pedophile too, like, legit. I can't remember if I told you this in our last interview, but I remember him sitting she and I down. I was 11 years old, and we were in his office. He wanted to have like a meeting with us there in his office. And I was sitting in the chair, and my mom was standing beside his desk, and he was at his desk right in front of me. And he said to my mom, I think a way for Tanya and I, well, they all call me Tanya, which is not my name, but
I will call you Tanya.
It's fine. But he said, I think the way that Tanya and I are going to bond better is if we sleep in the same bed together. And my mother said,
yeah, you actually did share that. And that your mom just was like, yeah, okay.
And I was crying, trying to keep her from leaving the house, because she would go on these like weekend trips on purpose.
No wonder you were competition. You were put into a position at 11 years old that you should still be liking Clifford the Big Red Dog. And she's leaving for weekends, and now you're becoming the substitute woman, not little girl. Mm. And she let you be prey to that. And so to look at you and to just see the glow and the shiny and you just have such an incredible way about you. And it's so inspiring.
Thank you.
And I know that, for me, when I'm looking at what are the things that helped me get through it, it was books, and it was superheroes I found, which so many people know my superheroes as kids was Annie and the superheroes, but also there was a little bit of fantasy of pretending that my life was someone else's that would help me get through, or I would pretend that my stuffed animals loved me. And then I had this active fantasy life that would kind of help me go through. And then I have some dysfunctional ways also that I survived through certain like OCD symptoms that I had gotten, or attachments to stuffed animals that were pathological. But they all served me. When you're little, you don't get to go, what coping skill am I going to use?
I was like you. I had a very heavy fantasy, inner fantasy world. And because I didn't know my biological father, I would spend copious amounts of my life going forward thinking who he was. Was he a big time director? Was he part of a mob family? Like, everything in my mind, I could create these scenarios for him. He turned out to be neither. I did end up meeting him a few years ago, but not knowing him opened up this whole world for me to, vibrate inside of, to imagine. But I've always been really, really good. Another coping mechanism is really good at future pacing myself. Like, what do I really want my life to look like? What is it going to look like when I'm free of this situation? What I didn't realize I was using was my higher faculties, my spiritual higher faculties my whole life. But I've always been very connected to my intuition. And if my intuition legit says turn left here, I turn left here. I don't need to know why. Like, I've just learned to listen that closely. And it sounds weird and maybe a little bit flippant and strange, but it's true. When you hear that inner voice that's like, did I turn off the stove? And you go look and you didn't turn off the stove. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, you're listening to that voice inside of you that's like, this is not an okay situation. You know, you need to get out of this situation fast. Like, my mind is a fast processing mind. And so I really do like get into like what's next quickly. So I've been through, I mean, living on my own from 12 until 18 years old, on and off the streets like that. Like, I really did develop like an animal sense to the world around me, which did leave me in a lot of fight or flight. You were talking about self-destructive things that we do as well to cope. Yeah. Wear it like a badge of honor that I was always in this state, you know, that I could never regulate my nervous system. I mean, that wasn't even a thing on my radar, regulate my nervous system. What are you talking about? Right? I was like, this is my energy. This is my speed. And I didn't realize that I was self-destructive that way and just living my life so close to the edge all the time, so close to the edge all the time, you know, so it's always going to be a work in progress for me. But the best things ever, you know, that I've developed is, for me, I started a spiritual practice 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago now. And so meditation, going inward and just asking, like, what are my beliefs right now? Because many of our beliefs have just been instilled in us by other people. And a lot of the ways that we view ourselves is because the one person out of 100 told you that you're a piece of garbage, and you hold on to that like a life raft instead of thinking about the 99 other people who were like championing you or saw something great in you or just loved being around you, you know? So belief systems are really a big deal. You know, I started to study that and I was like, why do I believe this? I don't hate myself. Why do I treat myself like I don't love myself? And I had to do this. Like, there's this thing called, I learned from Tony Robbins. It's called 7 Levels Deep. And so, you ask a question like, you know, what is my fear around my, you know, codependency? And then you answer that question and then you're like, well, that's not deep enough. Why do I feel that way? And you write it out. And then you're like, okay, but why do I feel that way? And you write it out. And by the time you get down to the 7th level, the 7th layer, you're like, oh my God, I feel this way because my stepfather said something to me when I was 11 years old and he's sitting there washing the dishes and threatened me with a knife. You know, it's like, that is a real scenario from my life. And I've discovered that a lot of my deep rooted feelings about myself were the ones that were, because they're in the subconscious mind, they were the ones that were really driving my bus. And it was driving me into this narcissistic relationship and driving me into this narcissistic relationship. And the whole time, what it really was doing was validating my belief that I was not good enough. So you change your belief and then suddenly your outlook on life is a little different. I mean, it's steps, right? It's like peeling an onion. Wow. But, you know, suddenly what I'm thinking in my mind is what's happening now in my reality, for the better. Instead of hating on myself, then my environment is showing me that I'm right, that I hate myself, and then using that as validation that I'm no good. Do you see?
I totally see. I do a lot of subconscious mind work. Yeah. And the one thing that I think I learned about the brain is that the reason we get stuck on the 1% out of 100 is because negative thoughts are bigger than positive thoughts. So they're processed in a different part of the brain. And they're longer and harder to break down because positive thinking is very much in alignment with the human spirit, right? When we are born and you look at a fresh little baby, whether you're looking at a squishy little human baby or a baby goat or a baby donkey, they might really love, that fresh-faced innocence. That is really what the human spirit is. Yep. So when you do subconscious mind work, it actually does take quite a bit of repetition because you have to retrain your mind. And the negative thoughts are so much bigger and harder to break down that to chunk those down, you have to do a lot of repetition. Yep. I have a little, I don't have one in front of me at the moment, but I have these little flip cards on a spiral, like a 3x5 cards. And I make them for every ounce or every area of my life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, financially. And I put in thoughts that I want to train my mind to believe. And I even made one before we hopped on the show. We were talking about, you know, the girly change later in life that I'm really going through very hard right now. And I've even made one around my body for that, and just wanting to manifest that deeper thing. I think that when you are really abused and alone as a kid, you have no choice but to turn to spirit. Whatever that is. I was not raised in a religious family, and I'm glad I wasn't religiously abused. My dad was in cults, so I had to be very careful of his philosophies. He did not take care of my body. He did dangerous things to my body with laxatives, telling me that the black specks in my blue eyes meant I was dirty and full of shit. But I was now also bleeding there because he was destroying my gut.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm going to school like this, no less. Okay. So I had to learn how to not take those pills and just keep them under my tongue and spit them out. I missed many days of school that year and then almost failed the grade. And then he called me a fucking loser. So I had to at night.
Sounds like my mom.
Yeah. I had to turn to something bigger than me. And I imagined my own thing. Okay. So but I looked at it more as an energy or a light and something very much protecting me. I would put myself in a bubble that I thought was clear that no one could see, but anyone bad would bounce off it.
Oh, you're like light years ahead of me. There was a Catholic church attached to my elementary school that I loved, and I became a part of the choir. And so I really that was my safe place. But what it taught me, and I don't want to poo poo all over, someone's belief systems who's listening, but what it taught me was to be terrified constantly of someone watching me and that I was going to go to hell over this thing and that thing. And it just made me realize, when my mom met my stepfather when I was 10, well, she met him when I was 9, but he came into my life when I was almost 10. What it taught me through that experience was his family dipped into a different kind of Christianity. And suddenly I was like, what? There's more religions than just Catholic? What? I was like, what are they? Yeah. And that led me down a road of discovery. But you were light years ahead of me. That's good.
I definitely thank God I was, though, because I was suicidal by 5th grade.
Oh, yeah.
This is a little embarrassing, but I started believing in something higher than me from The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, that's okay. I love that too.
Because
yeah,
when Luke lands in the swamp, metaphorically, he's stuck.
Yeah.
And the only thing that can get him out of the swamp is self-discovery. Right. So he meets Yoda, who I identified with. I never liked dolls. And I think it's because I didn't feel loved as a child. I made them all into weird Barbie.
That's hilarious. I never liked dolls either.
I never cut their hair off. I'd send them down the hill in the Tonka truck. I'd be like, but I did identify with Yoda. And from my social media on Instagram, I love animals. So I think he was more available emotionally, and he was so calm and squishy. And when Luke had to go in the forest, Yoda said, I cannot go with you. This is your journey. I can be your guide, but you have to go discover. And he found out that his dad was bad. Ironically, I saw the movie 7 times that year because, back in the day, everything was at a movie theater, and I saw it with my dad, which is interesting because I was forced to live with him at that time in my life when he was giving me all those pills and things like that. But it's the one gift I think I got out of that time is I would pray, dear force, please put me in a bubble and make sure no one can hurt me. And I've carried that through, and I've been very spiritual my whole life. When Neil Donald Walsh was first out, I devoured his books. I devoured the Celestine Prophecy. I loved Richard Bach. Jonathan Livingston Seagull was another hero of mine. He was a seagull that wanted to do flips and dives.
I've still not read that book. So small.
Oh, gosh.
I still haven't read it.
You have to.
Okay.
And then, of course, The Alchemist and other books, have really gotten me in touch with, it made me feel like my life had a purpose that was bigger than my human understanding of it. I've studied so many things. I studied Siddha Yoga meditation for 3 years, was at ashrams.
I think the biggest thing for me that's really landed really well is, it's a couple of things. It's I'm a soul in a human body having this experience. This is not this meat suit I'm in is not who I am. It's who I am in this life physically, in the physical reality. But to remember too, that this is all temporary. It's all temporary. And when we go through these these things, if we look at it from a soul perspective, and I'm looking down when I say it, like a bird's eye view of it, then we can see that, these experiences that we're having are necessary for our soul's growth. We're not meant for the human to get so caught up in it that we're like,
No.
it's like reading a book and we don't like what happens in chapter 2. So we're like, that's it. I'm never going to read another book again. It is meant, like, because we did incarnate as humans. So we are supposed to go through the low, heavy emotions of all of this, but we're not supposed to get stuck there. And then finding,
it feels like it's a school in a sense, right? Like we are having experiences to rub tar off a facet of a diamond, and that's the purpose of that life, right? I got really obsessed with the near-death experience during my PhD program. And even now I will go on YouTube and listen to those experiences if I'm having a dark day, because there is an overall purpose to all this, which kind of alleviates some of the toxic family pain in a sense that if you can see it for your higher learning, like what can your soul, how can you take your predators and turn them into a purpose? Or how can you take what was done to you and make it helpful for someone else's learning?
That's
and then
right there, I was going to say, when you learn that your experiences are not just for you, that's something huge. I'm so happy you just said that piece, because that's so true. Yeah,
it is. And I feel like it also helps us grow. It helps us grow when we see that we have an impact, right? I did this whole exercise on getting my authentic code. And one of my pillars is having an impact. Part of my purpose in this life is to have an impact. I don't judge by ego how big my impact is or how small, only that I'm having an impact. And that impact is helpful and it's loving and it's not hateful. Like no contact is nothing to do with hate. If someone is unkind to you, the most loving thing you can do is walk away. It gives them the consequence, which gives them an opportunity for their own growth. And if they choose not to take that growth, you cannot spiritually change that and you let them go. That is no contact.
There is so much to be said for not saying anything at all.
Oh, I agree.
Like there's so much power in you. Like this to me was like a big deal. Someone said to me, when you can write that email because you're so angry and you can like say all the things you want to say and then you delete the email, that's power. And I was like, back in the day, I was like, I don't know how to do that. I was just like head to mouth and I just like vomited all over everybody because I was so sick and tired in my life of being treated so badly by everybody. Like it really was like, it was every area of my life. And I thought, oh my God, am I cursed? Like I thought I'm going to pay for the sins of my mother for the rest of my life. That's what I thought.
I so appreciate that you said that, because on such a deep level, I think when we grew up in these weakened family systems with toxic adult children as our parents, I was very bullyable. I was bullied hard by younger and older kids. And I thought, why am I even here? Why am I even here? I mean nothing to nobody. And I'm so grateful that I got through those thoughts, that there was something in me. And thank God I developed spirituality very young. I didn't have a choice. Intuition, to kind of go back to what you were saying back then, is the only way that we can survive as children when we don't have like a past, present, future consciousness yet developed is we're using our intuition and we don't know it.
Yeah.
And we have this really strong muscle that we use. And people would be like, oh my God, you're psychic. I'm like, I'm not psychic.
You might be psychic.
My gray matter in my brain became very good at picking up on slight changes in body language or nuances in tones of voice or the way that somebody would walk, their body language. It helped me to know, are you safe or not safe? Right. And then that was something I think that helped. And I think all of us in this community have it. We should be proud of that intuition, right? And that we should be proud of being able to do these things, because being bullyable, I had to use my intuition too to get in and out of those scenarios.
Yeah, me too. I was going to say really quickly too that as women, for your women listeners, because I know that you have both, but for the women listeners, like, consider something really interesting here. It's like, if we look back through women's studies, just look at how women have been trained and programmed to never listen to their gut feeling, to never listen to their intuition, and instead to hand it over to authority figures who can tell you what to do better than you can. Like, if you think about that, how you've been programmed and conditioned just by society in general, but it's bigger than us. It goes on for centuries and centuries before we ever existed. This has been something that's been infiltrated inside of families to keep passing down and keep passing down and keep passing down to the point where we're not even thinking of that anymore. That's an interesting thing, because we're meant to use that inner GPS system to guide us through our life. We are meant to use it for that. That's what it is. Because you said, we should use it as something to be proud of. That's the thing that kicked off that thought for me. And I thought, isn't that funny that we've been taught that that's like woo woo and weird and don't do that? And it's like, no.
Well, and women were slaughtered for it. We were witches. I love being a magical sorcerer. I think it's part of my nature as a woman, right?
Yeah.
What we've shown, because I studied men for 4 or 5 years, only studied men. And I love men, and I loved studying them because it made them so much easier for me to understand. We have two fundamentally different brains. We use both sides. We have more neurons in our gray matter, and we experience far more negativity than men do. We are much more why? Because we have babies. And when men leave metaphorically to go hunt, we are left all alone, and we have to be very aware to stay alive. And we pack, women pack. So when we have these gifts, they're gifts for survival. They're gifts for keeping you alive, your baby alive, and keeping you well and your baby well. So if intuition is ever there, it's there to serve you. It is such a gift to have it. And men really need women to be intuitive, to be that in that space, because, there's that saying, behind every good man is a strong woman. I think behind every good man is a very intuitive woman. But you have to have a man who's willing to grow and a woman who's willing to be female and not male. There's a lot of masculine women running around these days with bigger packages than men. And they're getting cancers like crazy in their female parts. And I think the power that a woman has is to bring heaven to earth. I think there's so much power. I'm not saying don't use your voice, but observe. I learned I was so masculine when I was always using my mouth.
Me too.
When I learned to shut my mouth, I started hearing and seeing. And when I can hear and see, boy, do I manage myself better.
Yeah.
When I'm so busy talking and I'm trying to control, which is what I see in a lot of unhealthy women that I treat, is they're still masculine, but they don't want to learn to be feminine. They think it's weak. I'm like, there's so much power in being quiet. There's so much power in being observational.
Yeah.
Because you're not learning. If these are going, these aren't working.
Well, I found too, for me, because I was like that, because I learned how to do everything for myself from such a young age. And I really did see men as a threat to that. Like, I felt like everyone wanted me to get married. I wasn't complete without a man. Like, it was all this stuff. And I was like,
oh yeah, that's still there.
I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what can a man do for me that I can't do for myself? It was like such an ingrained thought in me that I led first with my mouth. And what you just said, I learned that through that whole entire thing, what was really happening was I was in my fear of being overtaken, and using my mouth and being very like right for the jugular kept people away from me that I was afraid of. So it worked to my advantage in a lot of ways, but leaning into the more feminine part of it, I realized I had such an adverse reaction. When someone said that I needed to balance my masculine, feminine energies better, I was like, what in the world are you talking about? All I heard was, I'm going to get taken advantage of. And it's really quite the opposite, right? It's quite the opposite.
It is the opposite. But if we go to your core wounding, you couldn't have been more taken advantage of than you were by men, your stepfather being that thing. So I have so much compassion for that. I was just so masculine for so long. And I found it tiring. I think a wily woman is rebellious.
Yeah.
And I love the rebel in me.
Yeah.
being rebellious is just, I'm a disruptor.
Uh-huh.
And that I never thought of myself that way until the theme of where I did my TED talk was disrupt. And they chose me because disruptors change the world. Disruptors come into status quo and they change it. I think the witchy women of the past or the wily women today were all a bit rebellious.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I would rather be rebellious than masculine at this point in my life.
That's a cool
because
idea. I never thought about it like that.
So much more fun. And it's really personal. It's not manipulative. It's not aiming to get control. But I'm going to stand in who I am, and no man, no woman, no nothing is going to be the boss of me. I'm the leader and owner of this life that I'm in, and I'm going to live it rebelliously, and I'm going to be there, So I think like all of these things can grow into something really, really wonderful. And I love how you talk about we are, and I love that saying in general, but we're a human being, but we're here having a spiritual experience. And I don't know how I would have ever healed without spirituality. I don't want a doctrine over me, because I've seen so many religiously abused people. But I do think that having a higher power, whatever that is for you, right, is important. And you can call on it. And the thing is it's there all the time. Yeah. I always, when I'm having a bad day, I'm like, oh, my monkey came unplugged, me, the monkey. I look at like universal energies, like electricity, right? And I'm like, I got to plug the monkey back in, and I'll get out my little flip books and I'll reprogram the subconscious mind, whatever, I've fallen down the rabbit hole of something. And I just know I got to plug the monkey in. The monkey came unplugged. It's a very slippery, loose outlet because we're human, right? But being able to recognize when the monkey's unplugged makes me go, okay, I have the power now to make myself safe.
You know what I was just hearing you say, how it translated to me. Tell me if I'm on the right track with the monkey being unplugged. It's like leaky energy. Where am I giving my power away? Is that it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Like I'm giving my power to a negative thought that doesn't serve me. Yeah. Right. And I get frustrated when I'm there because I'm like, why am I giving this so much power? But I'm there. So then I will just be like, just feel it. So I usually write about it in my journal first. I just feel it. And then I feel better because I always hit logic by the end of the journaling.
That's true.
And then I will go back and reprogram my mind, right? My mind, because of how I was raised and the stage of life I'm in, is requiring quite a bit of reprogramming right now. And what I see a lot is, I thought I was over this. I thought I mastered this. And I always tell people, you're never going backward. You're going inward. If you're hurting over something, don't judge that you're hurting over it. You're never going to be over being human, right? I always want survivors to feel like there's really only one path, and you can stay stuck. That's a path, or you can move forward, but let forward be your pace, not timing.
So for me, this was a really, really big deal. I had one of my spiritual teachers say, your expectation to just be like over it is hurting you, right? It's what you're talking about right now. And so she had me do this exercise where she was like, remember that what we resist persists. When we have something come in, like a fear-based thought or a self-worth thought, self-limiting beliefs, whatever, or even angry, like anything leaky energy stuff. She's like, think of it like your child walking into the room crying because they're in pain. You wouldn't look at your child and be like, get away from me. This is too difficult for me. Get away, get away, get away. The way that we do with our own feelings and our own thoughts, obtrusive thoughts, memories, trauma. So she's like, instead, what I want you to do, just like you would do with one of your children, is to hold the thought really close. Just let yourself feel it and remind yourself that it's okay. You're safe now. That fear-based thought can come from a part of ourselves that we have not healed yet. And it's just trying to keep us safe. So just to embrace it, hold it tight, close, feel it, and then feel free to release it, but not to hide from it, not to say, I can't deal with this right now. So I started to employ this years and years and years ago, and it was like crawling out of my skin, uncomfortable to do it. But I got used to doing that, and that what it gave me in the end of it was, after years of practice, and I still do it now, we still have our, at the bottom of one mountain, we're always starting something new. what it gave me was this understanding that I'm not asking to just have it all erased and it all be gone and never have to go through it again. What I'm asking for is to get better and better and better at climbing over that, going through it, dealing with it, having it be okay, just understanding that whatever happened to me, when we're talking about childhood trauma, sexual abuse, like all of this narcissistic stuff that these people do to us as kids. Like when we're talking about that, even, I have to remind myself that happened to a very different version of me. And as long as I keep beating myself up over it and judging myself and hating myself for it, instead of giving it back to my abusers, take it back. It's not mine. But as long as I keep doing that, I'm really, and this is more your space than mine, but we're really just like recalibrating all of our cells to that energy frequency over and over and over again. When really, the sexual assault that happened to me at 6 didn't happen to me at 49. Why am I still reliving this over and over and over again? And the same thing with the sexual abuse from 11 to 12 with my stepfather. How is me reliving that in the body doing anything beneficial for me at all? It's not.
That's why I say that all abuse is emotional, because we hurt far past the time that the abuse happened. When my dad bloodied my face, I hurt emotionally far past the physical wounding. Right? I look at those experiences as in my rearview mirror. They're reminders of areas of wounding that I could fall in. And if I am re-injured or I feel re-wounded or I had a nightmare or one of those things come up, it is kind of going through the steps that you just said. Is my therapist always says, hold on to yourself. Just hold on to yourself. And allow whatever's there to come. Anytime that I've had a post-traumatic stress dream and I wake up, I will, depending on if I'm rushing to work, but I will come home, I will journal about it to let it go. To remind myself of my present day state of mind, to remind that part of me that it's okay that you come out. I call those basement monsters. Like, that's okay that you came out. I also trust that maybe there's a part of that maybe I just need to relive a little so I can clear some part of it that maybe still isn't cleared. I look at it all as like an opportunity, right? Pain doesn't just go away. If it did, or if it was designed to, then we wouldn't have our amygdala, we wouldn't have our hippocampus, and certainly wouldn't have our vagus nerve, right? I think like what you said is it's just about practice. It's coming together within yourself, to yourself, and for yourself. I love the idea that we can hold on to ourselves. When we feel fear, the first thing we do is we want it to go away. So we start rushing. I have really gotten good at being like, oh, fear's here. Okay. Well, this is going to be uncomfortable for a minute, but I'm going to hold on to myself. I'm going to work through whatever that fear is. And I always find out that the fear is always so much bigger than the problem that's at hand. Or the hurt that's at hand. And then I always come through too to like, let's say something didn't work out for me. I will eventually come to, I think I was protected for that not working out for me. There was even this scenario that we talked prior to on the show, right? I'm glad that did not work out for me. And there were reasons that I think it didn't. And I think when you can get to that, that's an important place to be. You don't want to get rid of your negative feelings. You want to hear them like your inner child. You want to go down and listen. And if you weren't listened to, it's going to be hard to learn to listen to yourself. But if you listen to yourself, then you can change yourself.
And tell yourself, like, give yourself the biggest boost that you can along the way. Say things to yourself like, I can handle this. I got this. I can learn this. I'm the kind of woman or man, whoever's listening, I'm the kind of woman or man who, doesn't have time for those kinds of thoughts anymore. My newest one that I say to myself all the time when something pops in, I'm still dealing with my narcissist, right? Still pops in and out of my life, making trouble all the time. So when it does happen, of course, my central nervous system is like, like it gets all weird at first. And then I'm like, okay, I can feel this. I can feel this. And then I just think, I don't know, how can I Okay, sorry, I digress for a second. My new thought is I am no longer available for those kinds of thoughts. That's it. Doesn't have to be a big drama. It doesn't have to be this big, like, this big thing. I'm just no longer available for that because that old programming belonged to a very old version of myself. And I just don't want to entertain those things anymore as I'm moving into this new space of who I'm.
You're like, I'm not going to attend the argument
No.
show. I think a lot of times survivors, we over explain. And I think that we feel we owe everything explanation, right? Yeah. Well, I'm doing this because of this. And I'm doing this because of that. And we feel like we owe this. And I have learned that I don't owe anybody anything. I don't really even owe you an explanation. If I am very clear inside of myself that you have shown me that you're a person I cannot have in my life, I should not have to explain that to you. Me going silent or me really backing off, you should maybe take a spot check on your own behavior, right, and then do that. I don't do that work for other people anymore for them.
Yeah, me too.
Well, if someone backed off from me, I would be like, oh my gosh, I would call. I would want to know, have I done something? If so, what is that thing? How can I fix it? Right? If I cared about that relationship. Right? So I think we don't owe anybody the attendance at the explanation that they don't really deserve, especially when you have an ex who's narcissistic. I mean, they will just make up drama that just
you should have a whole talk about that one day. We'll have it on my show.
Absolutely. I would love to. I just love having you on because I think that your journey has just been so inspiring. And
thank you.
You're such a resilient woman. And I love your mind because I think everything that you share on the show is going to be really helpful to the listeners, right? I want us to learn every which way that we can to be more and more resilient. And we each come at resilience with our own uniqueness and our own vision and our own way. And so your vision and your way is going to touch so many people. And I just so appreciate you, Tanya. I just think you're just remarkable. And you have so many future things coming up that I can't wait to announce to my own following. And pay attention to this lady, listeners. She's a really good one. And what would you leave our listeners with today? What inspiring message of hope do you live by, or that you could leave for the listeners today?
All of a sudden my mind went like what? Because there's so many things, right? I think the biggest thing for me, and it keeps, resurfacing in my own life as like just my way of being now. It took time to really develop this, but just to have a playfulness about life. And I know that when we're coming at it from, having endured so much trauma and so much abuse, it's hard to think of in the moment. But if we can remember that we are souls and bodies having a human experience, yes, you're meant to feel this, but you're meant to use it for something bigger. So how do we make it less difficult? How do we make our playfulness, our life more playful, to find more joy and to find more goodness and to connect with other women, or other men who are enlightened this way and want the same thing for their lives? Like, how do we do that? How do we surround ourselves with a different caliber for our lives? But it's the playfulness piece, right? Like we're meant to play. We're meant to have fun through our lives and to remember, I mean, honestly, if I'm coming at it, I know this is a long answer. If I'm coming at it from like a human perspective, yeah, sometimes it can suck really bad and it feels all really dark and heavy and dreary and hopeless. But if I come at it from a spiritual perspective, I'm here to experience this. What if I asked to experience all of this? What if I'm meant to go through this because it's for my own higher growth and development? So I try to infuse play, and that might be the actor in me. Try to infuse humor and play and, what's the opposite to the situation? How can I live my life in the opposite way? Like I do all of these things all the time. So yeah,
I love it. Yeah. I have so much humor in my memes or that I'll see online. And I think adding humor and the lightheartedness is really, really important. You have to laugh. It's even when I work out, I try to have a little bit of a smile because it tells my brain something different, right? Like I don't have to do this. I get to.
Yes, I get to.
You don't have to. Yeah. You get to. And that's what I just want everyone to realize is, yes, add the playfulness, get the have tos out. You get to, you're allowed to. Yeah. If you fall down, get up. The great thing about being human is you can start over again.
Tomorrow.
Like if you right? If you opened your door and you broke no contact, start again. Just dust yourself off and start again, because you can always start this journey anytime you want. Just don't stop the journey. Just keep going. It's so worthy. Tanya and I love all of you. We see you. And if we can do it, you can do it. So honey, thank you again for coming back with me.
Thank you.
You're such a great gal. I adore you. And to my listeners, until next time, be well and take care of you. Well, Bravehearts, that concludes our amazing therapy session for the day. Please sign up on my email list at drsherrycampbell.com so that you can be in touch with me and see what's going on in terms of what I'm offering soon, what books are coming out, etc. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.